Coming up on tonight's Faith versus Culture, Why I Stand, Living Out Your Faith with Jonathan Isaac. Coming right up.
To have sex before you marry is a bad idea.
Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
There are problems of sin and habit that cannot be solved outside the person of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome to Faith versus Culture on the CBN News Channel. I'm Billy Hallowell, and I'm joined today by Trey Goins-Phillips. Trey, how's it going?
Hey, good to be here.
So we're going to have a great guest on today. I'm really excited about this, Jonathan Isaac. And, we're going to get into his story. And his story really centers on standing up for what he believes in and being the only one to do it. And I don't know about you, Trey, but whenever I see people do that, I'm always really moved by that because it's such a rare thing.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I think anytime anybody is acting counterculturally, it's worth noting. And especially we're CBN News. We love to highlight faith stories. So when there's a faith aspect to that too, and someone who's standing up to the gospel, in addition to being countercultural, which, by the way, just standing up for the gospel is countercultural. So this is an incredible story all around, and it's worth highlighting anytime this kind of thing happens.
Absolutely. So, all right, with no further ado, let's welcome Jonathan to the show. How you doing today, Jonathan?
I am doing great, fellas. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, so I want to start with July 31st, 2020, the date where you were the only person to not kneel during the national anthem in the NBA. And, such an interesting choice. Let's start with why you made that choice.
Well, the reason that I made that choice was watching what happened to George Floyd, and as tragic as it was, trying to work through what is the best way for me to respond, or if I need to respond at all, honestly, if I need to be vocal about a response. But I was almost forced to, because once we get into the bubble, there is this immense pressure on NBA players to have to kneel for the national anthem and wear a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. And so I think it is good to highlight that it was almost like it wasn't a choice, because the sentiment in the locker room amongst the guys was like, a team had already done this. We have no choice. We have to go along with what's going on, or we're going to be deemed as the only team not to do it. And so, but in the moment, I couldn't think of a greater message or antidote for the times that we see, not just racism, but all the things that plague the hearts of men. I couldn't think of a better message than the gospel. And so I didn't want to go along with anybody's narrative. I didn't want to go along with, whatever society was doing. I wanted to take a step back and say, who is Jonathan Isaac? What has changed his life? And it has been the gospel. It's been the love of Jesus Christ. And I was like, that's the message that I want to stand up and be willing to share, no matter the backlash that definitely did come. But, I was willing to do it.
I think that it's incredible whenever we're presented with opportunities like that, and everybody has experienced something that's difficult. Obviously, yours was at a greater level, and you mentioned being in the bubble, and I just want to know, what was the reaction like when it happened? What was the buzz at the moment when you decided not to kneel?
So what I tried my best to do with the story is take you through, like, detail by detail, moment by moment of leading up to the stand. And so we actually had a team meeting the day before the stand where we all got together, and the team execs were all there, and they said, you know what, we support you guys, whatever you want to do. And then all of the execs left the room, and it was just the team and just the players. And, everybody's like, look, we don't have a choice. This is the quickest meeting ever, because this is what we have to do. And one player turns to me and says, well, Jonathan, what do you think about this? And I think he did it because he knew that I may have a different opinion. And I said, fellas, I'm not going to put that t-shirt on, and I'm not going to kneel. And then that's when the chaos ensues. Oh my gosh, this is going to be the biggest story of the day. But we kind of just left it at that. And that ultimately led into the next day. And everybody's feelings was pretty much immediate. I could look out while I'm standing and see all the people kneeling and looking at me like, what are you doing? Are you crazy? And then having that press conference right after the game and being asked, do you even believe that Black Lives Matter? And then all of the fallout from there. So.
Yeah. And your book, Why I Stand, which is a book, people want to go out there, grab that. It's a great book. Now, what was going on in your heart and your mind in those moments, right? Because it's one thing to watch the reaction outside and to take that in from the team, from other people, from the audience, and then from the media after. But in those moments, standing there, knowing the gravity of that, what was going through your mind?
First off, thank you for the shout out. I got it right here. Why I Stand. Go get your copy. I appreciate it. What was going through my mind in the moment? What I tried my best to do was, it wasn't a stance that was like I'm protesting somebody's protest and I hate BLM and these guys are all wrong and all this stuff. It was really from a place of like, I understand what's going on. I saw the video of George Floyd. I understood how tragic it was, and I understand the moment, but I know what the answer is going to be. And the answer is not going to be kneeling. The answer isn't going to be a movement or an organization. The answer is going to be the hearts of men being changed, both white and black, both right and left. That ultimately, if we could show the love of Christ, which loves past failures, that loves first, the way that God has loved us, then we could change the world one person at a time. And so in the moment, I was trying my best to just do it humbly. And, I detail in the book that as I'm standing there, I'm thinking in my mind, like, God, like, purify my motives. I want this to be about you. I don't want this to be about Jonathan Isaac and being in the forefront. And then again, leading up to it, I was on the phone the night before with my pastor. I'm talking to him, and then I called my fiance afterwards, but I'm talking to him, I'm saying, like, this is going to be big. Like, as much as I, believe in what I'm standing for, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of, what people are going to say, what people are going to call me. I hadn't signed my extension yet on my contract. And so that was up in the air. But he was just like, look, you cannot stand for God and God not stand for you. And my wife said, echoed the same thing, that even though I'm in there standing alone, she's standing right there with me. And that gave me kind of the courage to kind of go through with it. But I couldn't sleep the night before.
You mentioned just then all of the different layers of anxiety, I guess, that you had to deal with before you decided to make the ultimately courageous stand that you did. Why is it important as a Christian for us to take stands like that, even when we know we're going to face backlash when we do?
Well, I think it's important, first off, because I think it's something that we're commissioned to do, just, at the base level. Jesus said, take up your cross and follow me. And, it is the narrow road, it is the road less traveled. We are going to be persecuted at the end of the day, the same way Jesus was. So, knowing that it was going to be tough, I really did feel like not only was it the right thing for me to do, but the Christian thing to do, to stand up and not make it about me, not make it about who's right and wrong, but ultimately make it about pointing people to Christ. And hopefully people can, grab onto that message and see it as sincere. But even going back to the anxiety of the moment, what people don't know is once it happened, there were people who said, Jonathan Isaac is the most courageous guy in the world. There were people who said Jonathan Isaac is the dumbest person in the world. But what I try to do with the book is take people through the journey of how I got here in the first place. That I'm not just saying I believe that Jesus is the answer because I believe it. I believe it because it's what I've experienced. And so when I was growing up, I struggled terribly with anxiety, fear, self-insecurity. When I was at Florida State, I was the #1 player in the state of Florida, and I was on anxiety medication. And so I was terrified of public speaking. I passed out in class before. I was not the person who would have done this, who would have stood on his own. But it really is a testament to the transformative power of Christ and just the growth through the journey of, developing a relationship with him. And again, I had the right people around me. My pastor has been a mentor for 4 years now. He's the one who really introduced me to Christ. And really taught me about the love of God to where I understand it today. But it definitely is. It's a journey to how I got here, and I think that's what's so important about the book.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to talking about your faith in a little while here and your upbringing and how you got where you are there. One other question just about this piece of the puzzle. You mentioned lots of different reactions, positive, negative reactions. How did you journey through the negative? Because obviously it was a major story, like you said, a lot of people saying a lot of things about you that weren't true or reading into things or making things up. How did you deal with that portion of the chaos?
Well, it was tough. My social media started blowing up. I'm a coon. I'm an Uncle Tom. I'm going along with the other side. Even I'm a white supremacist. And so, but at face value, what gave me a little bit of peace was that these people obviously don't know who I am and don't understand what it is that I was standing for, that it wasn't about a side. It was ultimately about Christ. But still, it was tough. I'm not going to pretend that it was something that was easy to do, especially with the next game after I stood, I tore my ACL. And so that even heaped on another pile of, negativity of people saying, a knee for a knee, and God took my knee out because of what I did. But I wouldn't have been able to get through the moment if I didn't have the right people around me. Again, like, my pastor there to encourage me, my wife, my family, my church family, to kind of undergird me and say, we're going to be along with you for this ride, and we believe in you. And that made all the difference. But it's not something that was easy. But I just tried my best to focus on the positive, which there was a ton of, and more positive than negative, of people coming out and saying, wow, that was so inspirational, and I want to stand up for my faith. And I got letters and mail and all the different things. So it helped me to get through it.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment with more of Faith versus Culture.
All right, welcome back to Faith versus Culture. We're talking with Jonathan Isaac about his brand new book, Why I Stand. And, Jonathan, the first question I want to ask you right off the bat here is, can you tell us a little bit about your faith journey? We know a little bit about the story and what happened, obviously, to you in 2020. But tell us a little bit of the backstory, how you came to be a believer.
Yeah, I wish I could give you every single detail right now, but that's a part of what the book was for. And it is just so much. And so if you want to get the real in-depth 411, go grab the book, Why I Stand. But pretty much I grew up in the church when I was younger in Bronx, New York, with my dad, my mom, my 4 brothers, and 1 sister. And we were in church like nobody's business every day. But my parents split up when I was 10, and I moved from Bronx, New York to Naples, Florida. So I went from a really, predominantly Black community to a predominantly white community. And I really struggled to make friends and to fit in. And I tried my best. So there's a couple moments in the book where I detail how I failed miserably with getting my, peers to like me. And I really, for the first time, developed a sense of self-consciousness where I was like, I'm not like these people, and I'm not necessarily, wanted or fitted in. And I took on the nickname Ethiopia when I got here, when I got to Naples, Florida, pretty quickly, because I was so skinny. And so from that time, I just battled with anxiety. I started to kind of draw into myself and be, so in my mind about what people thought about me and how I was perceived. And then I found basketball. And basketball was interesting because it started to get me everything that I wanted. People started to want to be around me. The girls started to like me a little bit. And so that I poured everything into basketball, and I got pretty good at it. But it became my identity, but, something that couldn't sustain who I am, because I was still struggling with those anxieties and fears behind the scenes of, if I have a bad game, everybody's going to not like me anymore. And I've worked so hard to get everyone to want to be around me. And so I just struggled, and it was always about performing for love, performing for attention. And the story really does take a turn once I get to the NBA and I'm experiencing the life of the NBA, and I'm loving it, I'm living it. And then a man stops me on the elevator and says, I can tell you how to be great. And I'm saying, be great? How? I'm in the NBA. And he says, you got to know Jesus. And I'm like, Jesus, man, I know Jesus. Yeah. But from that point on, my life just gets crazy, where there's the story of just unique circumstances and really like God leading my footsteps, ultimately for me to take a step back and say, wow, God, you're real, and you're revealing yourself to me, and you love me for me. It's not something that I have to work towards. It's not something that I have to perform for. And that was the first time in my life where I could literally breathe and kind of relax and kind of have a peace. And so I've just continued to grow in that relationship with God to where I am now.
And how have you been able to hold on to that in an industry in sports where there's a lot of temptation, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of fame, all the things that can force us or lead us, we kind of do it ourselves, but to trip up? How have you been able to stay so centered in all of that throughout that success?
Well, I think that, again, I have the right people around me, and the book is so much of a testament to them as it is to me and my journey and ultimately Christ. But if I didn't have the right people in my life, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And so, I have, a pastor that I can be accountable to, a wife that keeps me humble. But again, I just try my best to kind of continue to go down this path. And it's not about perfection. It's about aim at the end of the day. And I truly want to, please God and do right by him. And, I have my pitfalls and the times where I go left to right, but I just try to always, do right and kind of get back to the center. And so that's helped me, throughout the journey.
Yeah, we already talked a little bit about this, but I want to ask, how do you stay true to your faith over and over and over again, particularly when, like Billy asked you earlier on, when there is so much negativity, there probably is this pull, like, let me just give in so that I can go along to get along. What is it that's kind of, I guess, the motivating factor that keeps you where you are? What do those conversations look like with your wife or with your pastor when you're facing something that, might be tempting to get you off the course?
Well, they just keep it real. They keep it real. So I've had countless conversations, and a lot of them are detailed in the book where they just kind of point me back to Christ. But I would say I really do want to help. It's not about just being right and shoving the gospel down people's throats. I want to be, a beacon of light and hope for people to ultimately find Christ and develop a relationship with him for the better. I think a part of the way that, I've grown in it. I've had countless moments in the past, and again, detailed in the book, where it was like a little step of courage right there, a little moment of courage, a little moment of, expressing my faith, where it's grown to the point where I'm like, you know what? I believe this thing, and I know this thing to be true, and I know it to be the answer for the world because it's been the answer for me. And so, it's just a process of growing in faith with Christ, where now it's like, if I have another moment like that, I know what to do. I know it's the right thing to stand up for what I believe in and to share the gospel in love. And I think that's something that we forget sometimes, but yeah.
How did it impact your relationship? Because obviously a team, that relationship's integral. It's very important with each team member. How did the relationship maybe change or evolve as a result of the decision that you made in 2020?
Yeah, it was tough. I said primarily because it was such a polarizing moment and an emotional moment. And there were guys who really were riding for Black Lives Matter, and maybe not even so much the organization, but the phrase Black Lives Matter. And they believe it, and I absolutely believe it too. But because of how polarizing the moment was, it was tough to kind of have a real conversation because of just how hectic it was. And so there's a conversation detailed in the book about what happened after the conversation that I had with all my teammates in a team-only meeting. And it was tough, but we kind of agreed to disagree and left it with, look, you believed in what you were kneeling for, and I believe in what I'm standing for, and we're able to kind of go from there. But I'd say as time has gone on, and I think everybody's been able to kind of breathe a little bit and take a step back from everything that happened in 2020. And there is a respect level about the decision that I made, knowing that it was really tough to do, and we can kind of just agree to disagree and move forward.
I think that's such an important place to be at, right? Is learning to tolerate having different perspectives. There was a survey that was done last year. It was actually about cancel culture generally, and it said that 69% of Americans see it as problematic, that we are unwilling to forgive or to move past someone's past mistakes, or even, not in your case, it's not a mistake, but having a different perspective, people unwilling to accommodate other people's perspectives. As a Christian, why is it so important that we do learn to tolerate those differences in one another with your teammates and loved ones and all of that?
Well, I think that it's just, primarily the Christian thing to do. I think that sometimes we forget that Christ had to love us first for us to be where we're at. And so there's a verse that I always kind of point myself back to. It says, herein is love. Not that we first loved God, but that God first loved us. And so the prerequisite is to love and to show love at first. And then you let the Holy Spirit do the work in terms of, getting somebody's attention and you being able to share your testimony and ultimately see the change of God in their lives. But I just try my best to live it, even around my teammates and stuff. I'm not preaching it to them and shoving it down their throats. It's like, look, this is who I am. And this is the life that I'm going to live. And if you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. And if you want to read the book, go ahead and read the book.
Well, that's all the time we have today. Thanks so much for joining us, Jonathan. The book is Why I Stand. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much. Please, I encourage everybody to go grab Why I Stand right now. Again, I hold it up one more time, upside down, but go grab Why I Stand. This book is not just about standing in the bubble. It's my story, and I believe it to be inspiring and encouraging to all Christians to stand up for what they believe in, to share the message of the gospel and love, and to do it and ultimately become who God has created you to be.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we are going to be taking a quick break, and we'll be back with more of Faith versus Culture. Welcome back to Faith versus Culture on the CBN News Channel. Trey, that was a fascinating conversation, was it not?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love having more details into the backstory, not only about Jonathan's faith, but also the anxiety and the steps that he had to take in order to make the courageous stand that everybody saw in the summer of 2020. So his story is just incredible, and I was glad that we had the chance to talk with him about it.
Well, there are a couple of things he talked about that really stuck out to me. And I know there are going to be people who agree and disagree with him. And we talked about that. He saw that, right away. And he knew that was going to happen. But he also knew that his contract for the extension wasn't signed yet. And when you're in the NBA, you're talking about millions of dollars worth of money that's on the line. And there are a lot of people who, if they felt strongly about something, knowing that that could be an impediment, right, that standing up could actually hurt them, they might refrain from doing that. When he shared that detail, I thought, wow, you've really got to be committed to be able to say that you might be willing to give up millions of dollars, a contract, that you might be willing to become ridiculed and have people come after you. And some of the names that people were calling him, again, he had to have known. He said he didn't sleep the night before. His pastor, was on the phone with him the night before. And so that really, for me, brought it home. And I really respected that willingness to sacrifice for his sincerely held beliefs.
Absolutely. He really was putting his livelihood on the line. That's not, he has money and he I'm sure has saved money, but still you're risking your future. He's only 24 years old. So you're risking the future of your career in the NBA. Obviously you're risking your perception that the culture has of you and how you're framed in society. So there was a lot on the line, or there is a lot on the line. And he's still choosing to stand up for his faith, which I think is encouraging. Another takeaway for me that I think was incredible and a good reminder as Christians is that he was relying on other believers, right? He was talking to his fiance, his now wife, and he was talking almost daily with his pastor about this and making sure that he was putting Christ first above the culture. And I think that's commendable.
Absolutely. A very powerful story. And so we're going to take one final break here, and we will be back right after with more Faith versus Culture.
Well, that is all the time we have for this week's episode of Faith versus Culture on the CBN News Channel. Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to visit CBN News and Faithwire.com for more.